All right, we are live. That took forever for it to actually kick in. But good morning, Teach Better family. I have the wonderful Katie Miglin, the director of curriculum for the Teach Better team, as we are kick-starting this off, a journey in lesson planning. And I can't wait to dive in with Katie, as she is an expert. And I already see we have people waiting for us, Katie, as we're about to go live. So, Remy, thank you so much for the comments. For those who are watching, of course, you can throw in comments, questions as we're talking. And yeah, please pick Katie's brain and, I don't know, make her laugh, get her off her game. That would be extremely fun for me. So, with that, we're going to do a little intro and then we'll kick things off with the wonderful Katie Miglin. All right. Good morning, all. Hopefully you have some coffee in hand, Katie.
Good morning.
There we go. I knew you had coffee somewhere around you.
Coffee. It's a day that ends in Y.
Right? All right. So summertime, I know school is ready to kick off soon. I don't know if that's something I should be saying for some. They might still be in summer mode, but for you, are you ready to kick off the school year?
You know what? I would like to say yes. It depends.
You paused.
I know. Some moments I'm like, yes, I'm ready for routine. I'm ready for like all the fun that school brings. But then there's other moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, but we haven't done this. We haven't done this yet this summer, and so it's like I just go back and forth. But yeah, I know I did actually just talk to a teacher the other day, and she said like she went to go get her kids' school supplies and then was like, I can't. I'm not mentally prepared, and like didn't go. So totally sympathize with people who are in denial. It's fine. It's all good.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I was in the store the other day and I did a double take when I went by and saw the school section that folks were in and buying stuff. And I was like, I didn't realize how close we really were.
I know. I literally like printed my kids' school supply list this morning because I was like, I guess this is happening.
It's happening.
Yeah.
All right. So Katie, I don't know if you're ready, but we can dive into our conversation as we're kicking off a 3-day event. So each morning is going to be a live talking through the journey of lesson planning. So obviously we had to have Katie, start things off. So if you wouldn't mind, Katie, maybe just giving a little bit background on your educational experience, and then we'll kind of, go through our topic today.
Yeah, so I was a 7th grade math teacher primarily for 13 years. And just kind of during that time, I just was, I did lots of reflecting, lots of thinking. I always wanted to be the teacher that kids were excited to come to my classroom. But I obviously had that math title. And so I didn't always get that feeling when kids walked in. And so, so I really kind of, I guess, to kind of get into this, this idea stemmed from just lots of reflection and lots of I trial and error and just what did I want? And it's kind of been fun to just talk to teachers about this because sometimes I think we focus so much on the lesson plan and we really hone in on that, but we forget that the thing we're missing is actually just in the first few minutes. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about this today because I know you've sat in my sessions before at conferences, and this is totally a passion of mine. I could talk forever about it because it was something so small and simple that made such a big difference.
Well, the last session we were in Texas together and I saw you do this and people were energized, they're excited, they're engaged. So super excited for this conversation today. Yeah. Now, when I saw you talk in Texas, you started things off with talking through kind of some pitfalls, when you first started, what went wrong. So would you just share as kind of maybe some of those struggles that you had when you started teaching?
Yeah. So, we as educators, we get the training, I'm sure most colleges, it's you should have a bell ringer, you should have an I can statement, maybe the homework, an agenda, you should have all these things. And so I was doing all of that. And I had all of the things up on my board and it wasn't doing anything. And, kids were coming in, they weren't prepared. They were off task. I was spending the first 5 to 10 minutes trying to get them to get their supplies out. I just felt like I was doing all the things that I was told to do, but it wasn't working and it wasn't actually setting my class up for success. And so then it was like, okay, well, maybe how I'm presenting it is wrong. So, I have the same material or same information, but maybe I should have more graphics, or maybe I should have like brighter colors, or maybe I should have a song, or, it was like, I just kept like changing up what was on my, I had a smart board in my classroom. I know we have a variety of things in our community, but I just was like, maybe the delivery is the problem. And it just wasn't working. And I hope I'm not like isolated. I feel like I've talked to enough teachers that like feel the same, but you see kids, and I taught seventh grade. So kids came in every 47 minutes, and it was like they'd walk in and I could see their energy in the hallway. And I would, I'd be at the door and we'd high five or we'd have a conversation, and they'd come in and that energy would stay. And then the second I started class, it was like totally dead. And I knew it was partially because of what I taught. Like math doesn't always get people real excited. But I was like, what is happening where like we're good and everything's like fun, and now it's like totally lame. And there's days that as educators, like there's days your lesson is less than exciting. And I knew that there were those days, and I was like, I've got to accept that. But the days that I was like super pumped about my lesson, those days also started off so boring. And I was like, there's got to be something I'm doing wrong, like something where this transition time is off. And honestly, like I know that COVID was bad, like for so many educators, remote learning, but that is where I figured this out. And, we were all pushed home, and we all were in our living rooms or dining rooms or wherever. And it was like, I knew I had to get kids' attention and keep it because they were at their home with 1,000 distractions. And I was like, if they're not going to care about my classroom while we're together in a classroom with no distractions, why will they care when they're at home and they can play video games or go get a snack? And so I just was like, I'm letting go of all the things I've been doing on my like intro bell ringer, how to get them hooked. I'm going to go completely off the wall and start playing games. And so we did that. It was like every day during, remote learning, they would come in and we would do some fun virtual game. And that's kind of where it all stemmed from. It was like that worked for me in a virtual space. I could safely say many of my kids had their cameras on. They didn't always stay on, and that was okay. That was our agreement. But it was just like, okay, I need to keep this. What we're doing right now in this virtual space where I'm actually connecting with kids, I need to bring back to the classroom because I'm having so much fun with them and we're at home. So I want this to continue when we come back. And so that's kind of where all this stemmed from, and where it was like things weren't working.
No, I love it. Well, I got two things out of that, Katie. Is one that you identified a problem that existed, and then also took some time for reflection, which is huge. And so, as I'm going to ask the next question, I see some folks in the comments. So Remy again is watching, commenting. I appreciate that, buddy. And then we got Andrea. It looks like she's at gymnastics, but she's watching. So thank you, Andrea, for tuning in and listening to Katie through closed caption. But I want to talk about that reflection process because I really think that's important. I want to kind of dive in and go a little bit deeper in the sense that, you not only reflected on the problem, but you also wanted to kind of change the tone of the class, specifically at the beginning. So we just kind of walk us through that process.
Yeah. So the things I looked at was, okay, what are the things that I have on my, I'm just going to use the phrase intro slide for the sake of this conversation. Whatever that space looks like for you, just apply it to that. So I had like an intro slide, and on it was, your typical, it was a date, agenda, if there was homework, reminders, and then the supplies they needed. And I often would have like a bell ringer because that is what we've always been told, right? Is they should have something they come in and start working on. And so in my reflection, I was like, okay, well, what are things that I have to have? What are my non-negotiables? Like out of the things I'm listing, the day I was like, I don't know that they care that it's like, I'll put the day of the week, but I don't know that they necessarily care about the date. So that was kind of a not necessarily essential. Having some sort of an agenda was really important because I knew as a person, as a learner myself, that's what I needed. So I knew some students really relied on that, the whole, what are we doing today question. Reminders, with middle school or really any kids, like they need reminders, but I kept it super short and sweet. So it was like, if they had, field trip permission slip is due this week, you have spirit week next week, tomorrow is hat day, like anything that was just like a real quick little reminder was I would just make sure that was clear. And then I always put our goal, which was part of the agenda. And so I know I've talked about in this, in our community before, just I framed homework as a goal. And so it was, if you reach your goal during the day and during our time together, then you are good. If you haven't, maybe consider doing it at home. And so those are things that I was like, these have to be here still. Things I was willing to get rid of were my bell ringer, because I was starting off so crabby because they weren't doing it. And I was like, why am I exerting negative energy on something that they're not doing? And like, I know there's many people who will probably say like, well, that's not the point. Just don't get rid of it because they didn't do it. But that's literally what I felt like. Why am I fighting a battle when this isn't serving anybody? They're not doing it. I'm now spending a lot of time, trying to go over something, and then it's just like this negative vibe to start class. So I ditched that. And then it was like, okay, I need something to get us pumped for class. And that was where the real like kind of reflection came in, is it was like, I needed to feel excited. I needed to feel the energy. I was the teacher that would like have a dance party in the hallway, and I wanted that like to come in with me, but I wanted the kids to be engaged. And so it was kind of through that reflection of, I was like, what are my non-negotiables? What are the things that I just really want to be a part of the beginning? Because anything else can be done later in this class period. And that was kind of where I transitioned my, like, what's going to be visible to them.
I was laughing because I did the exact same thing. So, when you start teaching, you get a mentor teacher, and
Yep.
I was an art teacher. So I had a mentor art teacher, and they're like, oh, you have to use sketch notes at the beginning. And they gave me the layout and that. Kids hated it.
Yep.
I hated it. It turned into a compliance issue. And then it was just a fight every day. And it's like, why am I doing this when there's no value and they're not giving their best effort? I'm getting angry, and then it sets this negative tone for the rest of the class that everyone's miserable. It's like, I don't want to do that. So I ditched it. I got rid of it because I was like, no, this sucks.
Exactly. And also, I will say supplies. That was the other thing that I know, like I kind of didn't mention, but I don't know. I'm sure this is a common thing, but like, I really struggled with kids not being prepped for class and spending like the first 10 minutes of class, like wandering around the room, like getting a pencil, getting this, like, you have those kids that they are going to wait until you start class to go get what they needed. And so I was like, I need somewhere they can see exactly what needs to be on their desk. And I wanted it to be like very simple. It was like the same 3 supplies every day, so that they just kind of got into the routine. Because again, it's exactly what you said. You start off kind of in this negative headspace, and then it's like, well, how can you like quickly switch that to get the vibe back up? It's pretty hard.
For sure. All right. We got a ton of comments just based on what you said. So I want to go through these real quick. All right. So it looks like Coach Jay here stopped doing bell ringers and switched over to SEL style activities. So that's awesome. Definitely way more fun. Megan's pulling something. I need something to get kids pumped for class, which is 100%. And then Justin's got some more. He says it's definitely tough in regards to transition. So yes, there's a lot of hallway energy, sometimes a lot of hallway drama, a lot of things that happen in a short period of time, especially with those middle school kids. And so it's hard to get them going. So let's talk through what Justin had asked about, just wanting to hear some more strategies. So let's talk about the tasks that needs to be done moving forward. So what are some of the things that you started to do within that first 5 minutes?
Yeah. So one thing with math, if anybody teaches any subject area that kids struggle to become engaged, or is like a stereotypical hard class, I really struggled with kids coming in and shutting down. That was like a thing that happened. I'm sure there's people that see it happen all the time, but kids have low confidence. And so it doesn't matter, how easy the bell ringer is. They immediately felt like, I can't do anything in this class. It's super hard for me. So I wanted to create a space that every kid could have a voice. And so I just started doing completely random games. There was no like schedule, because I was also doing it I needed something that was going to stick. And so I was like, if I do certain things on Mondays and then another thing on Tuesdays, like I was going to forget the schedule. I was going to lose it. So it was just every day was something different. So we would do the one that stands out the most, because kids loved it the most, was Would You Rather. That was something I did start doing every Friday because I would allow it to take just a few extra minutes, which I know we'll get into the timeline of how, how things kind of are chunked out. I would do, like which one would you keep or which one would you get rid of? So it might have like 4 different types of food items. And it was like, okay, you can only keep one of these and eat it for the rest of your life. Or it was, you had 6 different types of cereal and it was like, you have to get rid of one. And so all it was really, really simple things that kids could answer quickly. Sometimes they were yes or no, but instead of them answering yes or no, I would put on a little clip art of like a thumbs up or a thumbs down. If it was like a numbered, let's say there was 5 items, I would number them. And so I would literally start class with just saying, okay, give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Which one do you agree with? Or hold up the finger of the one that you're voting for. And then depending on how long my lesson was, I would either let them like argue it out, or, I might call a couple kids and say, okay, tell me why you voted for number 2. Tell me why you voted for number 3. Or it was turn to the person next to you and debate with them and try to get them to agree with you. But what it did, regardless of what the activity was, it gave every kid an opinion and every kid could participate. So even the kid that came in and was just tired or had had a bad day, a bad morning, maybe they had just gotten in trouble in their last class, the agreement was you had to participate. So if Joshua Stamper had just came out of, a morning suspension and he was coming back to my class and he was crabby as can be, I would look at Josh and say, you have to at least tell me, you have to vote with your hand. Like you have to at least give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. You don't have to speak. I don't care if you talk to your partner, but you have to give me that. And slowly but surely, those tough kids that really struggled to be engaged in my class started to join in, and they started to feel like, okay, I can have this conversation with someone because it has nothing to do with the curriculum. And I did feel like that is when I started to like kind of pivot and my class started to have a different feel, because that hallway energy that we see and we love, and the kids are off the wall and sometimes too off the wall, but that would started to come in, because what started to happen was kids would run in my room to see what the silly activity was. They would look at my, they'd look at my board and be like, oh, I'm voting for number 2. I'm voting for number 2. And then the next kid would come in and they're like, no, that is so number 3. You have to get rid of Cocoa Pebbles. Like, and it just became this like silly, fun thing. And I would just stand at the front as they came in and just be like, hey, don't forget to get your supplies out. Hey, don't forget to like look at the reminders, because their attention was at the same slide. I just needed them to see all the stuff. So those were some of the like little things. Sometimes I would get them up and moving, and sometimes it would take a minute and a half because that's all the time we had. But I tried to be very consistent and very intentional. Sometimes people have asked like, well, can you make it curriculum based? Could you have tied it into your class? Yes, but just know the more challenging it is, or the more it's tied to the curriculum, the less engaged they're going to be, or the less buy-in you'll get. So sometimes I would put up like, I would put up maybe 3 math problems, and I would say like, which one would you be willing to solve? And then you had to defend it. And so that was kind of getting them to think about math, but not really. And so it was just, I just kind of consistently did that. And I just felt like it totally changed the culture of my classroom, because kids who weren't necessarily speaking to each other started to speak to each other because they were talking about like their favorite donut, or they were arguing over, would you rather like spring or summer, and it was just all of that kind of stuff was super, super important.
Yeah, I love it. And maybe you can speak on this too, is that, I mean, you are pouring into the relationship bank,
Yes.
right? And that is important. And there should be value in that for a teacher. And that's going to come around later where you're going to need that relationship to be built with a student, especially in tough situations.
Yeah.
And so it's only the first 5 minutes. It's not like you're taking away from the curriculum for the whole period.
Right. Well, and that's, you have to kind of decide like, am I losing a few minutes at the beginning, but am I likely going to gain it later? And that's where that was kind of the shift for me, is I was like, well, I'm actually losing more time because I'm walking around battling with kids to get their stuff out, or to get them engaged, or to get them to start doing work. So to me, I'm like, I'd rather spend the 2 minutes not fighting with a kid, but instead like doing something fun, because then what ended up happening is they started to do more. And I know it sounds like kind of, sometimes I like will do this session and people are like, yeah, that's not true. Like, there's no way. Like, when they call me out, I'm like, I wish I could tell you that it didn't work, but it did. It was such a simple little thing
Right.
that made such a big difference.
Well, and there's probably, I mean, I know me and you have worked in middle school forever. So, especially with the middle school kids, like that consistency too
Yes.
is huge.
Mhm.
And maybe you can speak on this, but knowing that, hey, Miss Miglin's class, I know the first 5 minutes, we're going to do something fun. I want to participate in that. I want to do something that's maybe different than some of the other classes. So I do want to run into that classroom. And I do know that my energy is not going to be shot down right away by a teacher, and I'm not going to be condemned for being a middle school kid.
Yes.
So I already know what's expected of myself. I have things that are established, and I think that consistency is pretty powerful.
Well, right. They not only know what to expect, which we know there's lots of research to support that that is important for kids, that they kind of know what's happening and there's that predictability. But what also I felt like it allowed me to address things that maybe had happened in the hall or had maybe happened in the world, or maybe, like some of those like in the moment conversations that needed to happen. So I would just ditch the fun activity and say, like, okay, what just happened at lunch? Let's talk it out. Let's get get our feelings out. Let's work it out so we can move on. But I already had built in those few minutes of like building classroom culture. So it didn't feel like I was losing time because I'd already built that in. So I saw someone had made a comment about the energy is so high. Yeah, the days that
Yes.
they're like so, so amped up, those were maybe the days where I had them all answer the question while they were standing, or I would like turn the music on and we would do, guess the name that tune for a minute. So then they could like kind of get their sillies out and settle down. So
Yeah.
just like building it in every day allowed me to then also kind of fluctuate if I needed to, if there was like something that happened in that moment that I needed to adjust, versus like being more reactive and thinking like, oh shoot, I've got such a big lesson. I don't have time to give this conversation, or I don't have time to, to do this. So
Yeah,
I
for
feel like
sure.
it was good for me too.
Yeah. Leaning into that energy. And man, we got a bunch of comments here. So actually someone, Mel, thank you for tuning in from
Oh,
Taiwan.
hey.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. And then I saw, I put this up earlier too, but Mike talking about gamification
Mhm.
versus what you're talking about, which is the short games
Yep.
at the beginning for relationship building. And then Justin's making a good point too, which I think is true. Maybe you could speak on this, is just the tardiness and
Yeah.
potentially alleviating that by the fact that people are trying to, experience the first 5 minutes versus
Mhm.
dragging their feet and not wanting to maybe do the bell ringer.
Yeah. So I would like to say that tardies were no longer a thing, but this isn't like a miracle working thing. There's kids still came in tardy because they're still kids, and that was fine. But one of the things I did to get all the important pieces to stick. We've talked a fair amount about some of the games and stuff, the fun stuff. But one of the things that I still like was always in the back of my mind was like, I still need them prepped for class. I still need their stuff out. I still need them to be ready. And that was still kind of an issue, right? Like, especially coming right back from COVID, it was like, that's still like, what do we need? And just that executive functioning. So and you can do this a variety of ways. I started just tying class competitions to it. So I full transparency, I am not a person that takes attendance every hour or every day or even most of the time. I'm terrible with any sort of consistency on anything. And yeah, I'm just like the stereotypical like can't follow through. That's me, even though I'm trying to be a personality. So for me, I was like, I need something that I will actually do. I will stick with it and it won't get lost. So I started doing the most basic class competition ever. The kids knew when the bell rang, I was going to go over the fun question, the fun activity, and then I was going to walk around and give points for kids who were prepared. And so it was literally I walked by every kid that had their materials out, they got a point. If you didn't have your materials out, you didn't get a point. But I didn't say anything to you. I was only going to walk around and say 1, 2, 3, and then I would just say to the scorekeeper, go put the score up on the board. And it was super simple. I was incredibly consistent. But those kids that were tardy, they knew they were likely going to cause their class to lose a point. because they didn't have time to come in and get their stuff out. So while it didn't necessarily clean up all the tardy issues, it did help some, especially the kids who are like the lingerers, those kids that like to like hang out right outside your door and then the bell rings and they then wander in. Those kids definitely came in because they were like, oh shoot, I want to get a point for my class. But it also kept the negativity off of me. So I didn't say anything. I didn't really engage with the kids who weren't prepared. I let their classmates help them out. And so, it was super cool. I know I've shared this story before, but one year I had a group of kids who I had like a couple kids who just didn't bring their stuff. Like every day they forgot a pencil. I mean, it was like clockwork. And, teachers at a certain point in the year, you stop supplying said pencils because you are now out of pencils. And so these couple kids every day would lose points for their class. And all of a sudden, these other kids at their table started showing up with extra pencils. They're like, hey, you need a pencil today. I know you need a pencil today. And it was like they were problem solving for each other and they were helping each other out. Or they would be like, hey, get your notebook out. Yesterday we lost a point because of you. And it was like those little things just started to happen so naturally that I wasn't the one leading it. It was all the kids doing it simply for a point. And then like my prize was that the end of the week or end of the month, the class with the highest points got like to sit outside, or they got to listen to music during work time. Like it wasn't even, I didn't buy anything for them. I didn't do anything big. I just like, they just had bragging rights that they were the best class. So again, keep it super simple, keep it something that you can manage, but anything that you can keep it positive makes a big difference.
All right, maybe we should talk about the structure of the 5 minutes. I know you've kind of hinted at various games and things that you implemented, but I'd love to talk about kind of the time frame and kind of what that looks like as far as the structure.
Yeah, so I'm going to use timelines as far as like the time limit based on a 47-minute class. So that's how long my class was. So obviously, if you teach a block schedule or if you have different levels of time, then adjust. But my goal was to be on to content, like into the mini lesson by the 5 minutes in. So that's kind of where I always had in my head. So just to kind of walk you through it, the bell would ring. Kids knew as soon as that bell would ring, I would start on the fun thing. So it was like the would you rather, it was the this or that, I would do like a pixelated picture and I had to guess what it was. So we would start with that. I tried to keep that to 2 to 3 minutes. So it was real short. If I had a lot of announcements or if I taught on a team in middle school. So if there was like team stuff we needed to address, that time would be even shorter. But I kept it to about 2 to 3 minutes. Then the next 2 to 3 minutes was all the other stuff that was on my intro slide. So we would go over what supplies they needed. That's when I would walk around and give a point. Giving points lasted about a minute. Like I walked very quickly around my class. I had classes of about 30, anywhere between like 30, 32. So that was super fast. And then we would go over the agenda and what the goal was for the class period. Once we started talking about the goal, that's when I was able to easily transition into the curriculum and to like get into the actual lesson. So I really, really focused on keeping it super short. In the beginning, when I first started kind of trying to do this, I would set a timer on my watch so that I could keep the conversation, because sometimes the kids would get super into it and they'd want to battle for a while. And so especially on the days that I knew I was on a tighter time frame as far as like, okay, we've got a lot to get through today, I would make sure to stick closer to like the timer going off. Other times, if I felt like, okay, we have a little bit of wiggle room, I would let them debate it a little longer. And so I just like kind of figured it out. And as I went and kind of got consistent, and then I didn't need the timers as much. But I would strongly recommend setting a timer. Maybe it's not necessarily like where the class can all hear it, but can you set something that'll like alert you to make sure that you're staying on track? Because it's very easy for the kids, especially when you see how excited and engaged they are. It's super easy to get them like off track and talking for a while, for sure.
All right. I saw that Remy is preparing over the summer to get his hallway energy up for his students preparing for the new school year. So I'm curious what those exercises look like, Remy. Yeah. All right. So I want to go back real quick, Katie, to something you had touched on, which was the student voice component of this. Mm-hmm. And I kind of want to know what is the benefit of that? And then how did you see that, or what were you trying to tune into with the first 5 minutes to actually get a space for student voice?
Yeah. So, we as a Teach Better team have talked a lot about kind of that culture, right? And how do you set up a classroom culture? And I don't know many educators. I don't think I know any educators that go into the world of education like looking to have a negative vibe in their classroom. It's like we all want kids to be excited. We want them to feel loved and seen, and all of that is great. But I think at the end of the day, there's this reality, and this is like a hard reality, is that sometimes our time with our kids, whether you teach elementary or high school or anywhere in between, the time goes by fast, and there are times where there's kids that you haven't connected with that day, and that's super hard. That was really hard for me to think about, because I was like, that's not what I became an educator for. And so I just constantly was reflecting on like, what can I do to set the tone that we are a family and this class is a family and we are in it together. And, and I know we've talked on, our morning show before, like the things I did throughout the lesson to make us feel like we are a sense of community. But I wanted students to feel that the second they walked in the door, because sometimes our schools are big. Sometimes our students are going through a lot of things that we don't even know about. And I wanted them to feel like this is a safe space where I'm with people I can feel safe with, I can be myself with, and I'm with an adult who cares about me. And I could sit and say that all day long. I could put it on my board. I could buy 100 posters that say that, but it's all about how a kid actually feels, right? And we know that. And so for me, it was, I wanted to give students a voice in a classroom at least once in their day. And now I'm not saying that other teachers weren't doing it, but I just wanted to guarantee that a student felt like they could be a part of the classroom for at least 1 hour of their 8 periods of that day. And so anytime I thought through the activities or the questions or the lessons or anything that I was doing in those first 5 minutes, I was thinking through every single kid's personality. And for those middle school teachers out there who've had the training, we hear that all the time. How have you made your lesson apply to your students? How have you made it so they can connect? Well, I couldn't always connect math to the kid who liked horseback riding, or the kid who liked, science, or the kid who like played basketball. Like I could do it some, I could create a story problem every once in a while, but it was like, oh my gosh, I can't do it to the 32 kids in this class that have 32 personalities. So creating those bell ringers allowed them, like, everyone eats breakfast. Everyone has an opinion about reality TV shows, or, it was like Netflix or Hulu. And it was like, it just gave kids a space to be a part of the conversation, even if it was just 5 minutes. And that was so important to me, because at the end of the day, I could confidently say, if nothing else, I could say, oh, yep, I didn't talk to such and such, but I know he voted to get rid of donuts. It was like something stupid, some dumb fact, but like I could remember that. And that was really, really important for me to just feel like every kid had a voice and could be a part of the family.
Yeah, I love that so much. And then just the idea too is like, you have control over your classroom and you hope it's happening in other folks' classroom, but you don't really know,
Right.
And you don't know if it's maybe it's just a first week of school, first 2 weeks of school, and then in those other classes it fades away, where what you're talking about is something that's consistent and that occurs throughout the school year.
Yes. And that's the thing. I think we're all pretty good at like either coming back from breaks or beginning of the school year. Like I think we all pour into our kids, in those times, but that's when you start to kind of see, I think, kids' true colors, is when the dust has settled and we're, in the nitty gritty of the content. That's when you start to see the kids that are really struggling. So I would just challenge you, like the things we're kind of talking about today are not anything big. Like this was not something that I like overhauled my lesson. I didn't really do a whole lot. I just really focused on the fun stuff, which was way more fun planning. So I would just challenge you, like we do this all the time where we say like the goal of our sessions is that you walk away with something quick you can implement as early as tomorrow. So if you're someone that's headed back to the classroom this school year and you're just like, I just need something small to make a big impact, I don't have time to revamp everything, do this. There are a ton of ideas online. I mean, you can ask anything from ChatGPT or just Googling it. Like super simple games. I mean, a lot of the stuff I would put up were things I just found online.
Yep.
And just fold those in. I mean, you're literally looking to change a couple minutes, but if you do it every day, I'm going to guess that you're going to see a huge impact on your classroom and just the culture of your classroom. And it might actually help your mood too. Because I know I got excited about some of the questions.
Well, right. And I mean, hopefully as a teacher, you're jumping in and having fun with your kids. Like that's actually shows a lot for the students to not just make connections with their peers, but also make connections with you as the teacher.
Yeah, I guess I didn't say that, but I'm saying this because it was a good reminder for myself, but I'm also saying it to people who are like me. I am a multitasker. Josh, I know this doesn't surprise you, but
shocker.
I'm the queen of like doing multiple things at the same exact time. But this was something that I was like, they had my full attention. And I'm going to be very vulnerable and admit that I was not always great when a kid walked up to my desk of like stopping what I was doing and giving them my full attention. I just wasn't. It's something I have to train myself to do, and I'm terrible at it. But this was something that I was like, I'm not taking attendance right now. I'm not doing it. I'm not checking my email while you guys do this. Like, we are having a class discussion. We are going to do this together. This is going to be something fun. And because it mattered to me, like it was important for me to be in that positive headspace, because even the days that you're teaching the most boring thing and you're like, I know I have to teach this and I don't want to, and I've just taught it for 4 class periods in a row. That like intro, those first 5 minutes were such a game changer in my mood, because it was like, okay, at least I got this fun thing to do. You know, there was something positive in the class period. And maybe I'm alone. Maybe everyone teaches everything that they love and everything's really fun. But I'm going to tell you, properties in math are not fun to teach all the time. I'd love to hear in the comments of like someone's lesson they're thinking of that's like the most boring thing ever. Josh, did you have a boring lesson that you had to teach every year?
Nope, never. Mine was the most exciting class on campus at all times. So I just wanted to make that clear for everyone. No, of course. You know, when you're going through art history, you know, you can see sometimes the eyes glazing over and kids trying to put their head down and things like that. So yeah, I mean, there were certain things in the curriculum that you have to go through and try to make it as exciting as possible. And like for myself, when I first started, it was boring, but then I found ways to like make it more exciting and make it more about stories. And, you know, when an artist cuts off his ear or is trying to commit suicide or doing something insane that they don't think of, you know, it actually sounds more like a soap opera when you spin it, you know, and share some of those, you know, juicy details. And for a middle school kid, that is exactly what they want to hear about. So hopefully they learn a little bit, you know, of art history in addition to the drama that goes on in these artists' lives. So there's ways to make it fun for them. But no, I'm with you as far as like, I mean, when you have those boring lessons, like at least you can focus on the fun times that you have with the kids. You get to learn about them as a person, what they're interested in, what's going on in their life. It may also be fun, but you also might get some insight on something maybe more dramatic that's going on in their life that you weren't really privy to prior to. So, you know, those SEL components that someone had put in the comments earlier, like I think there's some really huge benefits that we may not even see. It may start out as something that's fun to help the culture of the classroom, but it could turn into something where you're building a healthy relationship with a student and something maybe dramatic is going on in their life behind the scenes that they're going to share with you because they feel like they have a close relationship with you, which wouldn't have existed without the first 5 minutes and the activities that you're talking about.
Well, right. And you honestly, like, I know this is going to sound silly, but you can learn a lot from a person based on an answer of a ridiculous question.
Yep.
And so there were times that I was like, you know, you kind of had that, like, not what I expected. I'm going to follow up with that person later.
For sure. Yep.
Because it was like, but it was so helpful. And again, I would never have found some of that information out, good or bad. I would not have found it out if I hadn't taken the time to just do something kind of off the wall. So yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It does kind of and it creates a safe space for them to feel like maybe they've connected with you. I know I've shared this story before, but I have to share it again because it's like the funniest story. So I had a student teacher my last year teaching, and the question was, is cereal a soup? What is your answer? Would you say cereal is a soup?
No.
Okay. So kids every hour were like, no, it's not a soup. So my student teacher is running this, the lesson. And I'm sitting in the back and she completely straight face. This is like day 3 of her taking over. Completely straight face goes, yeah, it is. And the kids like didn't know how to react. So they're like, what? And she's like, yeah, it has liquid. It has food in it. Yeah, it's a soup. And they lost it. And it was like, it was so funny because I'm in the back, like, is she serious? Right? Like, what is happening? And so then fast forward several months later, she's getting ready to graduate. It's her last day. And literally kids are bringing up like, okay, for real, is cereal really a soup? Do you really believe that? And for me, it was such a, this is why we're doing these silly questions.
Yeah.
Because if I had asked a kid what lesson she taught that day or anything else, curriculum, they couldn't have told you, but they remember that so well. And that was such a funny moment to them to get to know her a little bit. Sure. And so, it just those little things, I think we underestimate the importance of them, something that it can really kind of make a big impact because kids are going to remember those little things way more than they're going to remember the commutative property of math.
Yeah. I won't even dive into that topic. All right. So, Katie, we're winding down our conversation. For those who are watching on the various streams, if you have any questions that you would like Katie to answer, feel free to throw that in the comment section and we'll try and touch on that before we end. But you had talked about kind of the next steps, actionable items, and takeaways from our conversation today. So if someone's listening, they're like, yes, I love this idea. I'd rather do this than fill in the blank starter for their lesson each day. Or maybe it's something like, hey, I've touched on this, maybe like we said, the first couple of weeks to get a relationship built, but this is something that I want to continue every day. What are some of those first steps that they can implement to make sure that their first 5 minutes is successful?
Yep. So I would start by what are the essentials? What are the non-negotiables, things that you are like, they have to have this information. So is that, an agenda? Is that a supply? Is that reminders? Those are kind of the 3 big things that I lean on. But the kind of think through what are the things you are not willing to get rid of that they have to know, and be really honest with yourself, because remember, you can also fold things in later on in the lesson. This is like their first impression with you. And then I would say kind of what do you want the format to be? How do you want to catch their attention? Because at the end of the day, they are kids. And whether you teach high school or kindergartners, they don't necessarily want black and white text that's, Times New Roman. Like they're not going to be excited about that. So kind of what do you want it to look like? How do you want it to be presented? And then I would start thinking through, I would just create a bank. If you're someone that is like, I'm just going to create these on my own, just start a bank of silly questions or activities or things. You can literally Google them. If you're not sure, DM me and I can send you a whole list of things to throw into Google to help you. There's also a ton of things out on Teachers Pay Teachers. If you look up like intro slides, there's educators who have created these already, but then just throw one in every day. And if you want, consistency, if you want Mondays to be a certain thing, go for it. If you just want something fun every day, for me, Fridays, we spent like 8 minutes on the intro slide because I would do a few would you rather questions. Kids loved that. They loved that it was like something fun on a Friday. So I just kind of think through like, okay, what are some of the fun things I can do? Maybe be strategic. Is there some things that you can ask that helps kids understand each other a little bit better at the beginning of the year versus like, kind of transitioning towards middle of the year? And then I would just build a template that all you are doing is updating it every day. That was a huge game changer for me as far as consistency. You don't have a lot of time. The educators don't have a lot of time to be reinventing things every day. So create a generic template this summer while you're, in a good headspace where you've got maybe an extra 10 minutes, make it as cute or as pretty or whatever as you want. And then all you're doing is plugging in the information every day. And I literally did it as soon as I'd walk into my classroom, I'd turn my lights on, turn my computer on, and I would update my intro slide. And that was how I kept it consistent every single day for the entire year. And in fact, the very few times that maybe a morning meeting went late and I didn't get a chance, the kids were in an uproar. Like, well, where's our slide? What are we supposed to do today? And I was like, okay, give me 5 seconds, So just creating that routine will be super helpful. But yeah, I would just say going through your essentials and then what kind of fun things are you willing to incorporate? And then just kind of set yourself up of, am I going to do some sort of class competition to help this stick? How will I enforce the routines? Because you essentially what you have to do is as the year unfolds, you have to enforce it, right? They're not going to care about your intro slide if it doesn't become important to them. And so while, yes, they might enjoy the fun question you're asking, they have to see the value in everything else that's up there. So either are you going to stand at the door and remind them to look at there? Are you going to create some sort of competition where the kids who, get their materials out or are ready, what's your thing that's going to help it stick? And so being mindful and reflective now will ultimately help you as you kind of get through this year.
Awesome. Yeah. I love the fact that you're stating don't reinvent the wheel. There's a ton of resources out there. I know also, I want to let you all realize this. If you're a leader and you're watching this and maybe you don't have a classroom, this is something that's not just for kids, it's also for adults. I swear this is something you could start off with any meeting to get things started, but it also is a great model to show that, hey, you've experienced this on the other end of it. It works. Now you can go and implement this in your classroom and not just talk about the strategy, but let them experience it themselves to then, okay, you've modeled it. Now, please implement this in your classroom. So for any principal, assistant principal, any administrator out there, if you're in a district office, you can do this in a meeting also, but it's really setting the tone to build relationships. And it's not just for our young adults, it's not just for our kids, but it can be used for any adult. It's all about the human connection and building a strong, healthy, and fun relationship.
Yeah. And if you're someone that maybe co-teaches or you're an instructional coach or, just someone that isn't necessarily like going to set up the whole lesson, this would be a great opportunity too, to create a bank of ideas or activities or things so that educators can use them. Because even if questions are repeated, every once in a while, kids still answer them. They still have an opinion about random things. So that could always be a great support to teachers too. But yeah, to your point, Josh, like how awesome would it be if every staff meeting is started this way as well? Because I think it would totally set the tone for something more positive versus like immediately getting into the nitty gritty of stuff. So I 100% agree. Yeah, this really kind of applies to anyone that's in education.
Yep. No, and that's what we did as an admin staff, because anything that we presented or we came in front of a group of people, we wanted to at least have some sort of strategy that they could bring into the classroom. So a lot of these games that you're referring to is something that we would do with our staff, and then they had fun, they saw the value in it, and then they started to implement it in their classroom, which they started to then see a better and positive culture that you're talking about. So there's so many benefits for this. I'm so excited that you were able to share this information with folks as people are starting to prepare for their lesson plans and the start of the school year. I see Megan here, being mindful and reflective. Love it. I know Coach Shay has thrown in an additional resource for folks, to try and get some more ideas. So that looks like a free subscription.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you have, ideas or resources, feel free. Obviously, this is something I'm passionate about, but I know it's happening in classrooms all over. So I'm not like, my soapbox, but it is something that if you're like just struggling or if you've had, you've been questioning how to get your class started, like just try this super small change because it could make a really big difference. But I know that there's tons of educators out there who are doing cool things like this or have, already. So either go to our private Facebook group, and if you are willing to share, or if you're looking for resources, drop some stuff there, or you can always reach out to either one of us too, because we're happy to, find those resources and share them.
Yeah. So Lisa threw in another idea for resources, the kids themselves. And this is fantastic. I love it. Talking about student voice, but then also ownership in the practice. And we had kids, so we did relationship circles on our campus. A lot of times we wouldn't even have the prompt. We would ask the student to create the question. They knew the routine. They knew it needed to be appropriate. They knew the construct of it. And then it was a lot of fun for them to run the activity and not only the prompts. So love it. Lean on your kids because they can do wonderful and amazing things.
Yes, I love that. That's such a good idea. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're toward the end of our conversation, so I appreciate everyone that tuned in this morning. Obviously, Katie Miglin is a phenomenal resource. She's got her handle on screen, so you can reach out and DM her for questions. Otherwise, you can email her at katie@teachbetter.com. And of course, Katie will reply to any questions or comments that you have in regards to lesson planning in the first 5 minutes. But just want to reiterate that we're going to be live for the next couple of days as it's a series talking about the journey of lesson planning. So just be ready for some additional content. And then, of course, if you need anything from the team, we're here to support you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful summer. And with that, Katie, do you have any ending words before we close it down?
No, thanks so much for joining us this morning. And I hope everybody has an awesome school year. And if any point throughout the year, if you need anything or just need to swap some ideas, you know how to get a hold of us. So thanks.
Perfect. All right, y'all. Have a great day.